The summoners did not understand what they had called forth. The orcs did not kneel. They did not obey. They burned. What makes the myriad of peoples, like humans, elves, and dwarves, feel alive in your world? And how do their beliefs, traditions, and conflicts shape their cultural identity and make them distinct? In this video, we'll explore what makes a TTRPG racial culture narratively rich. We'll walk through a complete design template you can use for your own creations, then we'll apply those principles to the Orcs of Naboria. One note up front about designing races, species, and cultures. Mechanics can be made to fit any system. However, they should be derived from the narrative no matter the system you choose. Before we start filling out templates or talking about mechanics, we need to answer one question. What makes a culture feel real? When you design a culture, you're not just listing traits. You're building a reason why these people live the way they do. That begins with identity. Who are they? What do they believe? What do they fight for? If you can't answer those questions, the rest doesn't matter and doesn't flow into a living tradition. A people's origin drives their belief. Their creation story explains their laws, rituals, and their taboos. If you create a rite of passage for a culture, it should trace back to something in their origin. As well, physicality, or how a race appears or presents themselves, matter. How a body works and moves changes how a society interacts. If they see well in darkness, that'll affect housing and how they fight. If they're built for endurance, that shapes travel and labor. Their environment, origin, and traditions should also affect how they dress and treat one another. People who live in a harsh desert environment will dress differently and have different needs than those who live in lush forests or underground. Allow the answers to these cultural insights to create depth. Language, diet, and practices should make sense for their environment and history. If the coast where they live changes, the cuisine will change, as will their stories as to why this change has occurred. If the language splits, names and how a culture identifies individuals and itself splits. Always avoid monocultures. Real people aren't flat. They change by region, class, and faith over time. If every settlement looks the same or every member of the race acts the same, your world feels fake. Give your races vibrancy. If you create diversity through their shared cultural norms, it will feel natural to a reader, and the culture will have a life of its own developed from its internal beliefs and experiences. Finally, story hooks matter. Give the reader tensions that can be put on display at the table right now. Conflicts over resources, oaths, borders and succession, or faith versus practice are the engines that drive stories. When you build with these principles, you're creating a culture that feels alive. Everything else will flow naturally from this foundation if created with these ideas in mind. Now we'll move in sequence through my design guide so it's easy to follow. But when you're actually building, jump around as ideas sprout. Let the good ideas lead, then come back to fill in the gaps. Start with identity. What do these people call themselves? And what do others call them? Create epithets that carry myth, culture, or spiritual meaning. Titles that say who they are before we read a single paragraph. Avoid generic labels. Aim for names that feel like they belong in a living tradition. The origin is the spine of the entire piece. In your project's voice, discuss how they believe they began, whether it's mythic, historic, or metaphysical, or any combination thereof. This explains why their laws, rituals, and taboos exist. Physicality is the body as narrative. Describe appearance, movement, and senses, but then push it into daily life. Don't list mechanics here. State the traits and immediately show the cultural consequences due to what makes them physically distinct. How is this society arranged? Show the reader how they organize, or define their own groups, such as clans, houses, councils, or castes. Write how leadership works, including how it's challenged. Define justice and how outsiders are welcomed or refused, and include subcultures or bloodlines if they matter. Write values in a way that creates drama. Phrase them as pressures characters feel, such as duty versus ambition or hospitality versus secrecy, so they can become scenes and not labels. Names are a system of personal identity. Define birth name patterns, family lines if used, and earned or chosen names tied to deeds or roles. Now, the life stages demark the milestones of a race's lifespan. Give these stages names that have meaning to their culture, then assign each one a right, a duty, and a permission, like a use of a tool, a role in the group, or the right of speech others don't have. These are tiny switches that make the culture feel lived in. Mechanics come last. Translate only what the narrative already demands. If a feature can't point to a sentence you've written above, either cut the feature or fix the missing cause. Now, let's see the design guide in action. I'll read excerpts from my Orcs of Naboria document to show you an example of how each section of the template shaped my writing. We'll begin with the name and epithets the Orcs of Naboria are known by, and call themselves. The Bloodbound, Scars of the Worm, the Children of the Eye. These titles do exactly what the guide calls for. They carry myth and cultural stance in just a few words. But what is the origin of these Children of the Eye? Why are they known as such? They were not born of this world. The orcs came screaming into Naboria in the Second Age, not as conquerors, but as a curse, summoned by those who sought to break the kingdoms of Anvi. They were meant to be a plague, a weapon, but the summoners did not understand what they had called forth. The orcs did not kneel. They did not obey. They burned. This origin explains their worldview and why their culture is the way it is, and the rites that they practice. Now, if we look at physicality, the body as narrative, we can show how appearance and senses shape a culture. Orcs are built like siege engines, forged in the crucible of divine wrath. Their skin ranges from deep green of moss-choked swamps and red rust to the ashen gray of scorched stone. Their eyes gleam with unnatural intensity, and their tusks, symbols of strength and heritage, jut from their jaws like the fangs of beasts. Orcs recover from wounds that would fell lesser beings, driven by a ferocity that borders on the supernatural. Their senses are equally sharp, honed by generations of war and wilderness. From this, how orcs carry themselves becomes obvious. These descriptions inform their interactions with their own culture and with outsiders. You can imagine how they move and look and understand that though there are shared features, no one orc is like another. Now let's take a look at how some of the orcs organize. Orc society is a storm of bloodlines, gods, and grudges. Each clan is a world unto itself, shaped by the divine patron it serves and the scars it carries. The red flame orcs are the most feared and the most faithful. Nomadic, bloodthirsty, and unrepentant, they follow the old ways, the rites of the evil eye, and the rage of Mordegal, the dragon of fury. Their chieftains are chosen in battle, their one-eyed shamans speak in tongues, and their dreams are filled with visions of their empire reborn. This shows a culture under tension, with rituals and practices that extend from their origins and their beliefs. Now that we have an understanding of how the orcs see themselves and how their culture interacts at large, we can discuss orcs as individuals. Orcish personality is shaped by fire, forged in blood, and tempered by the divine. They're not a people of moderation. They feel deeply, act decisively, and live with a ferocity that others mistake for savagery. To an orc, life is not a gift. It is a challenge. Every breath is earned, every scar lessened, and every triumph a mark upon the world. This helps the reader understand what could personally motivate an orc, and what their cultural norms are, so that if one is written that breaks those norms, we understand how others of their kind might interact with them. To further understand this culture, it's important to detail how they use names. Orc names are declarations, a weapon, a warning, a prophecy. It is earned through trial, through blood, and through the favor of gods or the fear of their enemies. This shows how names are tied to culture and achievement, and why they're important to their culture. Life stages give continuity and meaning to the cycle of life for a culture. Orcs burn fast and bright. They reach adulthood by 12 and rarely live beyond 75. But in those short years, they live more than most do in a century. Their lives are marked by intensity, not just in battle, but in belief, in loyalty, and in fury. This illustrates the meaning of aging for the orcs, and that it's rare for them to make it to a venerable state. As you now see, when these elements connect, you create a culture that is coherent for readers, GMs, and players. If this helped you design stronger cultures, like, subscribe, and share the channel with other world builders. Patrons can download the fillable race template and join our Discord for feedback and collaboration. Your next step? Draft one culture using this template. Start with the origin, then let the rest grow from there. In the next video, we'll delve into nation creation.